Author's House.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Richardson and I'm from Authors Press. Today is September 15th, 2021, and I am gathered here with Debbie Hickman, the author of The Exasperated Clock. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Debbie?
Oh, I can talk forever about that. I've pretty much been a teacher my whole life, and I have taught in so many places around the world, from Malaysia to Kazakhstan to Turkey to sort of India and Bahrain and Kuwait. And I have learned a lot about everything and the world. And I actually was born in Idaho, and now I live in Arizona, and I have 2 kids who are pretty much grown, and a husband here. And Sierra Vista is a city in southern Arizona, close to the border of Mexico, and it's been fine. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Oh, yeah, I can talk about my book. That's my favorite thing to do. Here's the cover of it. It says The Exasperated Clock. And it is, okay. And this is the first book I published. And I could go into a whole bunch of areas of it. But the reason I started this thing about these children's books and numbers is because I was reading a book that had mathematicians kind of talking about math. And they said, look, numbers are my friends. And from there, I kind of looked around and thought, hey, that's a new idea. Who says that? And as it turns out, that I must have looked at a clock or something and said, well, those are pretty dull numbers standing there like statues. And so I started ascribing maybe some personality to these numbers. And not only that, I made them into personification, I guess is the word, personifying the numbers into some very unusual and fun characters.
That answers one of my future questions. What inspired you to write this book?
That's it. However, I'll add one more thing. The kids. I mean, I was a teacher. I worked with kids. I told these stories over and over. I didn't write until I kind of left teaching. But I actually was so pleased with the way the kids responded to my stories that I just kept telling them. And then when I went overseas for quite a while, I would tell those kids the same stories. These were international schools I taught in. And they all responded, whether they were from Belgium or India or their home country or whatever. And they seemed to really enjoy them. And so it just has kind of lifted me, their response, more than anything.
Don't mind me asking, what age group did you teach?
Oh my, everything. Oh, that's another good question. Okay, I pretty much taught elementary. However, I did teach some classes in college. And I guess I never quite taught kindergarten. Okay, but but they liked the book. I read the book to them, and I can see that. And what was your question again?
I asked you which age group you were teaching.
Oh, well, I used to teach. That's what I'm saying. I taught mostly 4th grade, a lot of 4th grade. I did a lot of curriculum work. I spent time as, a curriculum person on the Navajo reservation for quite a while. And then I taught reading at all levels practically. And that's what I did.
I was a teacher's aide for about a year, and I taught everything but 3rd grade. Elementary, everything but 3rd grade.
Oh, you know, I hate to say this, but my favorite was fourth. They seem to be ready to hear anything.
I agree with you because they're just so energetic and ready, and they want to be there, and they're competitive about it too.
Yeah, they are kind of, but you can kind of capitalize on that if you're okay. Yeah. But I really enjoyed the fourth graders.
I enjoy working with children too, so I completely understand you there. Did you learn anything while writing this book?
You mean how hard it is to write? That's got to be said, and then on with that. But yes, I have learned that the first version and maybe the 10th version of your book can be improved, and it's so hard. And I was at a children's writing conference in Oregon with David Greenberg, and he was really enthralled with my ideas. And then, though, he came to the end of my book, and he said, "That's not good enough." And at the end of the Exasperated Clock, he had read it, and you know, it's the clock who tosses all the numbers off because they're misbehaving. And she's got to find some way to tell time. I mean, and I had written at the end, she only smiled a timely grin when people asked what time it was. And he said, "That's not good enough." And he said, and so I said, "Okay." He says, "Go back and try again." And that's when I came back with the number hired letters. Solid letters that would stand still and behave themselves. And I think without that experience, I wouldn't realize how surprising it is that you think you had a good ending like that. And then hiring the letters, I knew was the way I had to go. And he figured that out too.
So what it sounds like to me is it took a little bit of teamwork to come up with a perfect ending.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. And the teamwork was that I said, "Okay, he doesn't like that. You better change something." So I need somebody to be honest.
Brutal honesty is a necessary evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
How old were you when you wrote your first book?
I don't
or story.
Oh, the first story and something. Well, you know, I mostly told stories to my students, and once in a while.
How old were you, do you think, when you told your first story to your students?
Oh, I was probably in my 40s at some time like that, at 30s, 40s. You know, I always kind of told them stories, and so I never wrote a book down for a long, long time, but I had all these stories and they seemed to like them, especially when I got this inspiration for the Exasperated Clock. That one worked. Actually, before that, sometimes I'd be working with kids and they said, "I don't have any ideas for a story." And I said, "Oh no," you know, you'd be a teacher and you go, "Well, can you think of something that you've done? Hey, what about this or that?" And sometimes I just go, "Well, let me try to write that story. That sounds so interesting." And one time I did that with a kid because it was on the Navajo reservation in northern Arizona. And this kid said, I don't know. And he started telling me about something his grandma did. And I said, "Well, what did she do?" "Well, she got mad if I chased the sheeps or something like that." And so I kind of extended a story out of that just because I said, well, let me see what I can think of here too. But mostly I told stories, the Exasperated Clock and What's Up 7 to the kids. And I kept getting better and better at telling stories and adding stuff. And so by the time I quit teaching, I was ready to publish them. Or I had to work
Traditionally, stories are told verbally.
Mm-hmm.
Passed down from generation to generation to generation, and who knows? Maybe those kids will tell your stories to their kids.
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, the kids really get a kick out of these stories because it challenges them. Sometimes I keep thinking, well, yeah, those more able students who really think it's really funny, they get it right away. But you know what? All the kids seem to get the jokes in the story. 8 gets a job with an octopus, and they may not get them right away, but it all kind of works out in the end that they figure out what the joke was.
As a child, did you know you wanted to be a writer when you grew up, or was that something that just poof?
Absolutely. I had no intentions or ideas of being a writer. I don't know, maybe this is off base, but I remember as a kid, I would entertain myself with thinking of 2 very different objects and trying to challenge myself to see if you could make a connection with them. For example, I remember one time I said, an orange and a door. And I thought, what is the connection? Can I make a connection? And then it just popped in my head. Oh, opening a door is like opening the orange when you peel it. And there was some great satisfaction in that. And I would do that, sitting in the car or, and you're bored and you're trying to keep yourself alert. But those were the kinds of things I did as a kid. And in retrospect, I suppose that really helped my brain to say, oh, heck, just let it go. It doesn't matter. You can think whatever you want to think.
It sounds like even though you didn't consciously know it, you have always been a writer at heart.
Well, yeah, except that when it's actually on paper, I guess my hardest thing to do is to let go of ideas. I don't have a problem coming up with ideas. I have a problem with letting go of my ideas. And that's where a good editor comes in. And that has really helped me.
Right. A good editor who you like to work with and who likes to work with you makes a very big difference in the publication of your book.
Okay, now that is something I learned writing books. Yes.
Having a good editor makes a big difference. I completely feel you there.
Yes, I know that. No.
How does it feel seeing somebody else hold your book?
Just thrilled, because it's almost like when people call me and say, I was reading to my child or my grandchild, and they go, I said, which book do you want to choose? And they will call me up and say they chose your books. And I said, that's really nice of you. And this happened quite often, actually, because, I think they're a little challenging, and especially, well, I shouldn't say bright children exactly, but imaginative children that like to laugh because it's silly, but it's sort of serious actually in some of them. So yeah, it's really gratifying though to see you holding a book up.
Do you hope one day your books will go internationally popular?
Oh yeah. You know what I would like more than anything is, I wish there was some graphics genius who could put these in animated film, because I have, 4 of them done now. And it would be so delightful to see kids watching them in animated versions, because they have the dialogue already for them. And now
that's something you should absolutely manifest and look into, because it's totally possible for that to happen. You just have to work to make it happen. And I think that a lot of children would benefit both educationally and entertainment wise if you were to pursue that.
Well, one thing I've done in my last book, which is Six the Scientist, as a teacher, I always thought dialogue and conversation and basically drama were very important. So in that book, which now I will hold up It's called Six the Scientist. And it's color-coded for the characters. And so if a teacher gets hold of that book, it's so much easier to put it into some form of drama or expressive reading of some kind. And because the kids love, I don't know, I just sometimes think dialogue is more important to write than writing. I mean, I wish I could see kids doing more just conversational writing, with someone else or imaginary or however they would want to have. So, but that book is already ready. So all you have to do as a teacher is grab it and, copy it and let the kids go at it.
I just have a couple more questions for you before we wrap this up. What was your least favorite part about writing this book?
Oh, my least favorite? Well, the fact that I hate to throw out ideas. I mean, I get them and I think they're really cool, and then they say, well, come on, you got to lose that. Now that one's out of there. No, I said, okay, under duress, I do that. But I've learned to really respect somebody who will say, throw that out. And I also found that editing for every little comma and capital and everything else is hard. I don't see my mistakes. So I really have learned I've got to get somebody else to read it, because I tend to just be so absorbed about that time. If the book's at that stage, whoa.
This is a little bit of advice from me, because I'm also a writer, but it's more of a hobby for me. I write poetry, I write short stories, things like that. I am with you. I hate throwing out ideas. So I have so many notes with all of my ideas that I have to get rid of. I write them down. I keep them in a little notebook, and I might use it in a later story where it fits better, where it makes more sense.
That's really comforting to hear, because I argue with an editor and they go, oh no, throw that out.
Right. So when that happens, my advice to you is get a notebook and write it down. Say, okay, gone. Write it down in a notebook and use it later.
What I do when I'm typing is I just cut and paste it and put it at the very bottom. And if I really can't stand it, then it goes usually. So I get it out, and then I sort of hang on to it at the bottom.
I very much recommend getting a notebook about this size. I don't know what size this is, but 5x8, I think. 5x8 notebook, and write down all the ideas that you need to get rid of but don't want to.
Yeah,
it's a way to
a good idea. Yeah,
keep those ideas without forcing them.
Well, I think one of the maxims is less is more.
Yes, it is. That's something me as a writer I struggle with, which is why I told you about my little method of write everything down, whether you think it's good, bad, ugly, all of it.
Yeah, exactly. I understand.
I just have two more questions for you before we wrap this up. Where can readers find out more about you and your books?
Well, they could easily go to Authors Press, and I do have a website with them, which is DebbieHickmanBooks.com. Or they could go to Facebook, and I have a page called Debbie Hickman Author, and they could do either one of those. Or in the Sixth the Scientist book, I ended up putting my email address in there, so you're welcome to use any of that. But I don't know. I'd love to hear from more readers too.
That kind of builds into the next question that I was going to ask. How would you feel if readers reached out to you?
Oh, great. I would just love it. I told you before that the people reading to their kids reach out, and the kids are the kids are really responsive to these books. And this Six the Scientist, though, is probably a little bit older age than the Exasperated Clock. It's for kids who kind of have, like by 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they have to have paid attention to climate change. It's a story about a scientist. Six was on the clock, got thrown off, and then decided he'd become an insect devotee. I don't know what's the word, an entomologist. Actually, I use those kind of words in here because I don't like to dumb it down for some of those kids. And so
I've seen some articles, this is going a little bit off topic, but I've seen some articles that the older you treat your children, the more you teach them, the more willing they are to learn, because kids are sponges. They are as smart as you allow them to be.
You know what? I agree. And I would tell kids some of the darndest stories, but I said, this is something that just intrigues me. And they loved it. I mean, they just eat up some of my stories because they're true. And I try to keep up on, especially science stories. I like to do things with. And this climate change thing. This is the only book I know that is this detailed about climate change. I looked online to see if there were other climate change for children, but I think this one actually gives them an insight into what is really going on, because I've got 2 characters who discuss climate change. And, well, here's one example. 6 tells 3, you're going to, we may lose our insects and we won't be able to eat. And 3 goes, what? Who eats insects? And it was kind of fun to get them into those kid questions, which is what questioning is all about. And it's really about helping kids follow their curiosity is what I'm trying to do.
This is the final question before we wrap this interview up. How do you feel about working with Authors Press?
Oh, they've been great. I am surprised. They are I would say they're pretty professional, and they give you lots of opportunities to, get your books in the public eye. And the people, one day I spoke to somebody and I said, I feel like family to you. I've called you so many times, or you've called me. So yeah, they're a good company. And I noticed, that's enough.
We're very glad you consider us family. We consider all of our authors to be family as well. So I think it's very, not coincidental, but touching that you also feel that way.
Yeah, it is. It's just like, well, and if one of them's gone for a while and they didn't tell me, I kind of wonder what happened to her. So, yeah.
That's all the questions I have for you today. That's it. That's all I have for you today, Debbie.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Nothing I like more than talking about my books.
Thank you so much for meeting with me today, Debbie. It's been such a pleasure and such an honor to meet the author of such a wonderful book. I was reading through this myself earlier and I was like, this is so cute. Like, I would have loved this as a kid. I would have read it.
I would have eaten it up too, I think. But I've heard that from adults. And I think if adults find it interesting, like that, this really plays good with their kids too then.
If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to Authors Press either through our email or via our phone number. But that's all I have. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Nicole, for doing this. So I'll keep writing. My next book's about
Please do. Keep writing, keep submitting to us so we can keep publishing you. Have a wonderful day, Debbie.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.